Well, generally, I'm an early riser, Terry, and I find I'm most productive in the morning. So I get up early. We're an always on organization because we're global. We're distributed in over 130 countries around the world. So there's always something that happens overnight that I have to, address.
Karen Shelley and John D'Addario, welcome to Making It.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
I want to start the conversation off by sharing something personal with both of you, which I typically don't do. I've been an endorsee of your products for over 30 years and have played your strengths for even longer. And the reason is simply because they make great sounding products. You make great sounding products that work on all of my instruments, from acoustic and electric guitars to the vihuela on the back of the wall and to all of my stringed instruments. So, I play them simply because they sound great. And I want to thank you for helping me sound my best and for your technical guidance, John, and your team throughout my career. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for supporting us, Terry.
Yeah. So before we get into like your personal background and your upbringing and the history, what brought you to where you are today, John, I want to start with you. How would you describe a typical day as CEO of D'Addario?
Starts early with catching up on emails, and generally I work in person in our office here in Farmingdale, probably about 4 days a week, 1 day from home. And so when I do get here, I have my cadence of meetings, generally every day, and I try to find some quiet time to learn and to think strategically as much as I can, and it's not always easy every day to do that, but I try to do that. And I also, like to get up and walk around the factories a little bit here and there. If you ever experience a tour of our factories here, you'll quickly realize that it's a family culture here. Everybody feels like they're part of one family, and I always make eye contact with every employee in the factory and in the office, of course. Generally know everybody's name. It's hard when you have 1,100 employees globally, but try to make a personal connection with people. So yeah, that's a typical day. It's doesn't end, unfortunately, at 5 o'clock. Generally, at night before I go to bed, I'll just catch up on a few more emails that come in. But as I said, it's an always on role as the CEO of a global company, just gotta. That's. I have to be wired to accept that.
Yeah. And how do you find quiet time during the day?
It's not easy, but I've always had an open door policy in my office, but I'll occasionally shut my door just to make sure that I don't have any distractions or interruptions to find that time to learn. And we actually just launched a learning opportunity or tool in our organization called LinkedIn Learning that we're all learning a little bit about right now. And I'm encouraging our employees to find maybe 10 to 15% of their time each week to leverage that tool and learn about something new, whether it's AI or other emerging technologies that are out there. I think it's important for our employees to continue to have an appetite to learn. And we always emphasize that we have a number of values, but probably the most important value at D'Addario is curiosity. And it's the curiosity about how something could be better, whether it's a process or product, and curious about learning in general, about being a better professional or even a better person.
Boy, that sounds similar to my kind of days as well, but I get it. And I respect you so much for that, for the way that you do what needs to be done, but the way that you're doing it, open door policy and doing your best to know every single person on your team. It's the way you were brought up in your family. It's a family business. And we're going to talk about your early years with the company as well as a teenager. I want to switch to Karen. You're the VP of Corporate Social Responsibility for the D'Addario Foundation, which is a philanthropic foundation. And first of all, it's a really great title. I'm curious what the title means. And also, how would you define your job and what your day is like?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually VP of Corporate Social for D'Addario and Company. And through that role, the majority of my time is spent serving as executive director of the D'Addario Foundation. I would say a lot of my time is spent either exploring prospective new grantees or meeting our current grantees. So our grantees are nonprofits around the world who we're able to provide with grants, and those are cash grants or in-kind product donation grants. and really just getting to know each of them has been incredible. I've been with D'Addario for exactly 1 year now. My anniversary was this week, and it's
Congratulations.
been, thanks. It's been great to get to know not only our colleagues in the office, but also our wider family, our broader family of grantees, because even though they are technically grantees of the D'Addario Foundation, which is technically a legal separate entity from D'Addario and Company, they're very much a part of the D'Addario family. And we've seen a lot of them grow up. We even had one of our interns this summer is a scholarship recipient of a scholarship from the D'Addario Foundation. She grew up learning music in a program that the D'Addario Foundation, have supported for more than a decade. So seeing that rise up has really been fun, getting to know our grantees. Yeah, I would say that's pretty typical, either getting to know them on the screen or on the phone, or going out in the field and actually seeing their programs in action.
Thanks, Karen. John, you have a degree in business administration and marketing, and I'm wondering how that best prepared you, that study of that actually getting a degree best prepared you to become the CEO of a global company, and not just a global company, but your family global company.
Going into those studies, I had a little bit of a background working in the business, albeit part-time. But learning some of the different concepts around marketing gave me a whole new appreciation of what my father, my uncle did in terms of basically starting the D'Addario brand in the early 70s, and what it takes to create the type of brand awareness that generally evolves into kind of a loyal connection with customers. Listen, I got to be honest with you. I probably learned more though on the job than I did, in a classroom. And I've always felt that it's important to have that foundation, that academic foundation. But you got to put it to use at some point and learn from your mistakes, and continue to apply what you learn to other things. So yeah, marketing. It's something that provided me a nice foundation for my business thinking and strategy around how we elevate our brand and company in general.
I'd love that you mentioned learning by your mistakes. I'm a big believer in that, and have learned a lot through mine and through watching other peers and the mistakes that they've made, but mostly through mine. And I'm remembering I played an event for Disney years ago, and it was for the awards for their Imagineers, which I didn't even know the term, but it's their scientists. They're engineers who create new technology. And one of them who had won an award came up just to say hi. He was a fan of music and came up to talk afterwards and was asking me about playing guitar and everything. But I said, so what about you? Like, what's your job actually? What do you do? And he said, well, what we're really supposed to do is fail. That's our job. They just want us in there coming up with ideas. And the more we fail, the happier they are, because of each failure, we develop new technologies that are in animation and everything.
Absolutely, and it's interesting you say it, because I can remember countless examples of failures that actually led to phenomenal breakthroughs. One thing that comes to mind is if you go through our string factory, you'll notice that there's a high level of automation that we've implemented, because we actually literally design, program, and build our own equipment. But we actually had this concept of how we can automatically make a string from beginning to end, literally, completely automating it. And the concept started like 15 years ago. It involved like this vertical machine that would automatically thread and wind strings, but it was a miserable failure. Because the reason why is because we were kind of ahead of ourselves. We didn't have the knowledge about how this could work at the time we invented it. But then 10 years later, we're like, something just clicked, and it's like, wait a minute, if we could do this, then we can make this possible, right? Yeah. So it's interesting, because we learned a lot from that failure, and now we're a world-class, highly automated string factory as a result of it. So many examples of that in our business.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I know you're also open to input from your team for new products.
Oh yeah,
there's always innovative products that you've put out, your capos with Ned Steinberger, and
Yes.
the new tuners that are that you USB plug in for charging.
Yes.
But also, I love that I just got one, and they besides being great tuners, they also can swivel at any angle, up,
Right.
down, around, and and that's just allowing your team to say, why don't you try this?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
As soon as I picked it up, I could see the process that led to this.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of products in our accessory portfolio that have had like literally 7, 8, or 9 renditions of it, and they were all improvements, incremental improvements that we've implemented. And it's actually part of our DNA as a company. Is like never be satisfied. It can always be a little bit better, and that's what we strive to do.
John, also, let's just talk for a moment before I go back to Karen about you worked at the company when you were a teenager in the summers, and you also grew up as an athlete. And I'm wondering, do you believe the lessons that you learned working at your family's company every summer and also growing up as an athlete were equally beneficial in preparing you for your career?
I would say, yeah, absolutely. So on the professional side of things, or literally working as a teenager, I learned a lot about not only the business, but how to interact with people and collaborate with people, right? And then on the sports side, I learned a lot about leadership, particularly leadership in situations that are difficult. Because in business, you're going to have some good days and some really challenging days. But the thing is, being a consistent leader, whether it's the chips are down or things are really positive. So absolutely learned a ton from both experiences and in slightly different ways.
What are a few qualities that you consider make a great leader?
I would say empathy, being a really good listener, being humble. I'm a type of leader I'm not overly confident. At times, I question myself, but it's okay to show that. Right. I'm not perfect. And always be willing to learn from others too, and again, that comes back to to the listening aspect of things. So those would be some of the traits that I would say that I feel like is fundamental for a leader.
And Karen, so what about you? You have a bachelor's and a master's degree in English. How'd that best prepare you for your job or jobs at D'Addario?
Yeah, even more so. My degrees are both in writing and creative writing. So I used to joke that I have 2 degrees in unemployment, and I'm really glad that I've been able to remain employed. To me, though, just doing a lot of, my degrees were very focused on both literature study and writing from a production standpoint. So I would say closely reading between the lines is something that I've always been very good at, something that I love to do, whether that's looking at the written word or listening to what people are saying. So going really what John just said, doing a lot of listening has helped a lot. And, knowing your audience, which is, of course, something that's really important when you're writing anything. And those are things that I do day to day as I just communicate, whether it's in written form or spoken form or building relationships. I think that's about it.
And you went to school in Florida. Is that where you're from?
Yes, I am the child of 2 New Yorkers who moved to Florida before I was born, and then I moved back to New York. Yes, I grew up in Florida. Growing up down there, Florida has a program where it's an incredible program called Florida Prepaid Tuition. And
I missed out on that. I know. Born and raised in Miami, but yeah, that didn't exist.
It started I was one of the first part of the generation to get in, but it almost works like Social Security in a way where, if you have a kid that's 5 years old and you enroll them in this prepaid tuition, the tuition is locked in at that rate when the kid is 5. So by the time they're 18, you as the person who's been putting into this account has paid for their college, but at the rate that it would have cost if the kid was 5 years old. But by the time your kid's in college, some other 5-year-old is paying into the program. So I was very, very fortunate to have parents who invested in that. And when it came time for college, they said, you can pick a state school and, here you go. Or we support your decision to look elsewhere, but you're going to have some loans to think about and things like that. And I said, well, this is an easy decision. So yeah, I went to University of Central Florida. I am a Golden Knight and very happy with that decision, although it seems very long ago at this point in my life.
How about this past year? Does that seem very long ago? Your first.
It does. This has been a very fast year and love it. I absolutely love being a part of it. Yep, absolutely.
So what's the connection from you learning to play clarinet in sixth grade and then going on to learning sax to your passion for the work that you do now?
Well, I've worked in nonprofit for over 20 years, I would say, various nonprofits. They've all had an angle that focused on education, but various types of education, college access, science education, just access to education in general. So for the first time in my life, now that I'm at D'Addario, I'm working at a nonprofit where, yes, of course, I believe in it. I believe in all of the nonprofits that I've been a part of. But it's been really fun to be a part of a nonprofit that I can personally connect with, because I grew up learning clarinet in middle school on, and then I kind of left it. I went off to college and I didn't continue with the clarinet. So for decades of my life, it didn't really occur to me to think of myself as a musician, even though for these critical growing up years, I very much identified as a musician. That was my life. I mean, I was in that band room every day, as often as I could be. And then I just let that go. And so it's really cool decades later to find myself in a role where I can connect my passion for nonprofit and community building and social responsibility, but connect that with something that has always been very meaningful to me and what I know music did for me growing up.
John, what about you? You were encouraged by your mother, who was a classical pianist, to take piano lessons from 8 through 13, I believe.
Yeah.
What did you learn from studying music that made you a better CEO and also made you a better person?
Well, look, it's just like
before you quit.
There's
a story there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the piano was enjoyable, but it was hard work.
Yeah.
You really got to work at it, and that's certainly something I learned from that. I also learned that I really enjoyed it, but I ended up quitting when I was 13 because I got heavily involved in competing in sports, and it became a big part of my life. But today, it's probably one of the things I regret most is stopping playing. And one of the reasons is similar to what Karen was saying, is I work with a team of people, many of which are extremely talented musicians.
Yeah.
There's not a day that goes by that I'm extremely envious of that. And there's not a day that goes by where I feel like I wish I could just sit down at a piano or with a guitar and just play and be flawless, and I regret that. And my mom and dad told me the day I quit that you're truly going to regret it. And they were right. They absolutely were right. Now it's never too late. I dabble in it here and there, which is good. And listen, as I get older, and my children are now almost out of the house, I have more time. So I find myself migrating back a little bit to it, which just is a testament is that it's never too late for someone to get back into it. And of course it prepared me for business, because not only to learn the discipline that it takes to play the piano, but have an appreciation and a background in music so that you can kind of anticipate the thinking and the needs of your customers, our musicians that we serve.
John, I know you've heard me talk about this, but I've been learning guitar for about a year and a half. I started learning before I even, thought about working at D'Addario, but it has been really fun to learn something and learn an instrument as an adult. And I say that because, John, it's never too late. But I got myself a really cheap guitar. Now it sounds a lot better because I put some D'Addario strings on it. But to be the person in charge of your own decision of when you practice, instead of some other adult in the house saying, have you practiced this week? I haven't heard you practice. You're the one in control. I have loved doing that. And I think I end up practicing that guitar way more frequently than I ever practiced clarinet or saxophone or piano as a child. I don't know that my neighbors in New York City are happy because, there's failure. You're practicing the same piece over and over and over again. But it's been a lot of fun. And I think, to your point, John, it's a testament to that music is always with you and you can always pick it back up and always learn something new.
Absolutely.
And likewise, I'm always learning new instruments, vihuela, cavaquinho, ukulele. It's, I find it stimulating and fun. Of course, it's smart, for me as a studio musician, but it's also, it keeps me fresh, and it keeps me like, I'm curious. I stay curious as well, John, as you had mentioned earlier. And remarkably, every time I end up with a new instrument and I reach out to your company, you make the strings for it. and even before, like way back in the day, before you were making your high string, Nashville tuning sets, I was still getting, you guys knew, and were able to send me individual strings so I could put a set together.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Back in the, I don't know, early 80s. Yeah.
Terry, one of the things we're working on right now is providing a consumer the experience to actually customize their own set.
Wow.
Of strings. Yeah. So we're in the early stages of rolling this out from the technology background and the work cell that we're creating around this whole experience. But a consumer in the future is going to be able to go on our website and literally engineer their own set in terms of gauges and alloys and so forth. So I'll let you know when it's live.
That's going to be fun. That's fantastic. Let's talk personal, to see where you both came from, in a little more detail. So John, you live in Long Island with your wife, Michelle, and your daughters Lily and Lucy, and your son John D'Addario the fourth. Yeah, that was not a hard decision picking a name, or was it?
Not well. I got to be honest with you. I originally I was thinking I would not name him John, and one of the reasons why, Terry, is because I cannot even begin to tell you the complications that sharing the same name as my father created for me, particularly in business. There's literally been times where we've flown on a business trip. One time in Argentina, and they thought our tickets were duplicates, so they canceled one of the seats. So we had to actually stay an extra 2 days to fly home because we lost one of our seats on the flight back. Right. And then literally phone calls that come in, they say, They ask for John Jr. thinking they're asking for me, and they get my father. So I got so fed up. I'm like, we cannot put my son through this. But honestly, though, it's easier now because I'm referred to as J3 generally, and my son's referred to as J4. So it's going to be much easier now.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's true. I was in a meeting with your dad, John, who's also obviously a John, and J4 walked by because he was interning at D'Addario, and your dad was like, "Have you met J4?" There's so many Johns.
One of the things that I read about you, John, about your early summer years, working at the opportunity, was about seizing the opportunity. That's like the athlete in you. I know that you're competitive, and also, when you say you got serious about sports, you did. I mean, weren't you ranked nationally?
Yes, in platform tennis. Yeah.
So, and you're still very much an athlete, although of course we modify as we get older.
That's correct. Exactly. I still try to stay active, but you don't recover as well, unfortunately. Yeah.
Preaching to the choir.
But it's always been a passion of mine, and I love to compete, Terry. I mean, whether it's in sports or anything, like even piano, and going through some of the NISMA competitions. I mean, I was super competitive, and naturally I worked really hard to prepare. So I apply that line of thinking to just about everything, including business these days. I'm always in something to win, and to feel good about it, right?
And to win doesn't just mean financially, of course, that's a big part of it, but to win and having mutual satisfaction from your entire team for being a part of it.
Absolutely.
Empowering 100%. Them. Enjoying the win of all the failures that took to achieve that win.
Exactly.
All of that. One of the things that I read was that you learned various skills that helped define the company's meticulous attention to detail and continuous improvement mentality, and which are things that you speak about, and, which clearly defines your products. I'm not paid to endorse D'Addario, but it's so easy to compliment your products because, again, as I said, you have helped me sound my best through my entire career, and even even before we all started officially working together. But when I read meticulous and continuous improvement mentality, take me back to you being 12. Like, was that from your dad, your uncle, or were you that way already?
It was probably both. It's part of our family DNA. Yeah. In fact, the interesting thing, Terry, we when we did some rebranding for D'Addario, about now, roughly 8 years ago, or maybe longer, we created a brand book, and it literally was more or less a visual depiction of our culture. right? And one of the pages in that brand book is we're the most difficult people to please. And what that means is that we're never satisfied, right? So growing up, like sitting at the dinner table, I might say, "Hey, Dad, I got a 99 on my test today," and his natural reaction would be, "Well, what prevented you from getting 100?" And there's good things about that, bad things about that, but that's the mindset. Is we're never satisfied. We're always looking to do something better. Yeah. I will say that what helped us as the business grew globally was you kind of had to put a language behind continuous improvement. And one of the things we adopted was lean. Toyota Lean as a philosophy in the business in general. And so we taught during the Great Recession when things were very slow around here, rather than have a massive headcount reduction, you know what we did? While we were slow, we trained every one of our employees on Toyota Lean. No matter what their function, and it created a language around what continuous improvement really means and some of the different disciplines that you would implement to sustain that. So part of that was, for instance, we value stream mapped our entire operation, and we studied every aspect of it and where we found waste, where we can eliminate that waste, and where we can increase our capacity. So this continuous improvement mentality has always been part of my family's DNA, whether it's inside or outside the business. And now our family of employees, they're kind of trained to think very similarly. Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine that you attract people who think similarly. That's
absolutely
part of the interview process.
Yep, that's
case in point, right. Karen.
Exactly.
Interviewing
I'm
her.
laughing because the interview process was very detailed.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah.
But it's great because again, you find people that fit with the culture, I think.
Right.
Yeah, and Terry, when I was a young boy, working in the business in the summers, I'll give you an example. One of the things I worked on was building some of the bill of materials for manufacturing, right? Mm-hmm. And you make one little mistake on a spec sheet, it could be enormous in terms of the impact negatively, right? So it trained me to really think it through from end to end in terms of the attention to detail it takes to perfect a process and make it repeatable, which is vitally important, obviously, in manufacturing.
Tell me about your 3-year stint working in cosmetics.
Oh boy!
And also, I mean, we don't have to spend a lot of time on that, but I'm curious. Did you just feel like I want to do my own thing?
So what happened is when I graduated from the University of Richmond, I actually had 2 job offers down in Richmond, Virginia. And because I wanted to do something outside of the family business for a period of time. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it quite a lot, but at the same time, my father and my uncle had gotten involved, and it's a long story how it happened, but they got involved in actually running a contract manufacturer of cosmetics, a business, literally a business. It was through a real estate investment that turned into owning a business, literally. And so I'll never forget, they encouraged me to come home because they needed help because, of course, they had their hands full with the music business in general, let alone running an operation in a completely different industry. Mm-hmm. So I came back, and weirdly, although it was part of the family business, it really wasn't. It was a different experience. But probably the most profound thing for me as part of the 3 years is that the roughly a year and a half of that experience was actually working for another company that we ended up selling the business to. Mm-hmm. It was a company based in New Jersey, which was a much bigger contract manufacturer of cosmetics. And so I was the general manager of the facility on Long Island for them as a 25-year-old of employee, a little over 100 employees. I mean, think about that. I learned so much from that experience at such a young age, and that prepared me extremely well when I eventually migrated back to the music business in what was 1996. I applied all the things I learned right from the get-go. So yeah, 3 years that were partially with the family, but the other part not. And it what I accomplished was exactly what I wanted to have, which was working outside of the realm of the family business and learning about your strengths and weaknesses and some things that you need to work on.
So you were supported and encouraged by that decision in your family because it first of all, everybody benefited, not just you.
Yes, exactly.
But it also broadened your point of view, your perspective.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Karen, there's a quote I want to read about you from Suzanne Daddario Browder, who was the former executive director of the foundation. Imagine there's some sort of connection as far as a relative. I know it's a family operation.
That's my sister.
There you go.
And she's still a board member of the foundation as well.
And the
She's
company,
board
the board of the company
yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Karen, so what Suzanne says is Karen is a trailblazer, and I'm very excited to have someone with her skill set lead the organization. That must feel really good to you to get an endorsement from somebody who grew up in this music business family to have that level of support and faith.
Yeah, Suzanne is wonderful. Like I said, she's still playing a tremendous role in the work that the foundation does day to day. And as John pointed out, also the company's work. Yeah, it's great, but I think that also goes back to interview process. We all got to know each other so well during the interview process that I think there was a good amount of trust on both sides, because I was not looking for a job when this job opportunity came. I actually was very happy where I was at one of our grantee organizations, actually. But then when I saw the job description, I couldn't not apply. And so getting to know Suzanne better through that interview process reinforced. I was like, if this is what it's like here, yeah, I really want to be here, you know?
Did you relocate for the job?
No, I live in New York City, so I actually do a reverse commute to Long Island when I go out to the Long Island office. So I did not relocate. I think I'm in New York for the long haul.
Yeah. Back to your family roots.
Yes, exactly.
It's funny that we have some similar background. My dad was from Brooklyn. That's where he grew up.
My dad as well.
My mom from Michigan. So not two New Yorkers, but same thing. They migrated down, and then, and then we all appeared, in growing up in Miami. On a personal note, I know that you're a huge theater and Broadway fan, and I can see why living in New York would be, a great thing. To have such easy access to theater and that kind of culture. But you dreamt of being a talk show host?
I did. I wanted to be a talk show host when I was little, and probably still do. But I loved Oprah Winfrey. She was my idol growing up. I was born in the 70s, so I grew up in the 80s at the height of Oprah, the 80s and 90s. And I remember I saved up my allowance so that I could buy a VCR so I could record Oprah, so I could, because I would have rehearsals and things like this after school. So that way Oprah was waiting for me when I got home, and I'd push play. I wrote a letter to her. Somebody wrote back with her signature. I'm sure it was a photocopy, and it hung on my wall for a while. So yes, I do. But I think it goes into what I do now, which is still a lot of communication and getting to know people and building relationships and keeping in touch with those individuals and keeping track of what they're doing, not just a day-to-day business stuff, but also like, hey, how's your kid's college search going? Or how was the concert that your nephew played in? Things like that.
You never know about the signature being a photocopy, because Oprah's the one who said, always sign your own checks. Sign every check. John, you would appreciate that as a business person, because I remember seeing her interviewed one time about how to not get taken by accountants and all that stuff. And she said, I signed every paycheck. So it's very possible she might have signed every, letter that was written by somebody on her team.
Could be. I mean, I had it in a frame that matched the letterhead. I mean, I was a weird kid hanging on my wall, a letter from Oprah.
So you both have a love for travel too. John, I'm not sure if yours is much of a love as Karen's, but I know you've traveled the world many times, and I find it really stimulating. It's exhausting, of course, and harder to travel now than previously. But I think travel is so important in broadening your horizons, and your perspectives about life, and instead of being rigid and, thinking. What's you're both nodding yes, so you're in agreement. John, I'll start with you. I mean, what's your favorite thing about traveling?
Well, for me, most of my travel, admittedly, is on a business trip. And most times, unfortunately, I don't have the time to really sightsee, and see other things. But in the times I have, it's been tremendous. I mean, such a great experience. I'll give an example. I was in China pre-COVID for a couple weeks, and the middle weekend I had time off, so I went up to the Great Wall, and it was an unbelievable experience. And just to see that, it just what it is, it makes you feel like this is such a such a different culture, and the history behind it. I mean, you look at our history as a country; it pales in comparison to other places in the world.
Right.
So
Our
I think
oldest city is St. Augustine, right?
Yeah.
It's what, 200 years old?
Yeah. But the other thing too, though, is what I've learned a lot about my international travel is so important to understand and experience different perspectives and people. And so one thing that we recently did as an organization, because we're so global, one of the things I always preach to my team is that when you look at the majority of the content that we create, it comes from our headquarters here in New York. And I have a graph that shows that the further out, or from a distance standpoint, the further out you go, the signal strength of that content diminishes. Right. Mm-hmm. So one of our goals is to increase that signal strength no matter where the content is in the world. So part of what we've done to change that is we've decentralized our marketing efforts. So now we've created these mini marketing teams with completely different perspectives that are empowered to create content, not just for the local market, but for globally. So we have a mini marketing team in Europe. We have a mini team that's emerging now in Asia, probably in other parts of the world as well. So again, I've learned that it's so important to have those different perspectives on your team. And because let's face it, our customer base is very diverse in general. So to have those perspectives, on your team to support that is huge. So that would be one of the more profound things I've learned.
That makes so much sense because your audience, your customers are diverse, not just geographically, but culturally.
Culturally, yeah.
Musically, stylistically, you cover every instrument, for the orchestral music, and then certainly pop, rock, jazz, and then all sorts of indigenous instruments.
That's right. Exactly.
As well. And so with that, that makes perfect sense that you would look to the people who use your product to help figure out how to broaden your appeal and your marketing.
Absolutely. Right.
Karen, what about you, for traveling?
I think it's extremely healthy to feel foreign and out of place once in a while. And so I love that. I love landing in a place where I'm forced to navigate. I have to look up words and understand what people are saying. I have to figure out how to use someone else's transit system, understand the cultural expectations, if I'm traveling in a place where my shoulders should be covered, where they might not need to be covered in New York, or, customs of how I speak to different people, or how I communicate with men in certain countries versus here. It's different from place to place. And I think it's getting out of your comfort zone gets you out of that stagnation, and being exposed to new things, which might simply be an experience or might turn into something where you're like, I learned something. I love that. I'm going to apply that when I get back home. And also to your point, I think, Terry, that you just said about making the indigenous strings, for instance, or strings for indigenous instruments. It's something I've even started to have conversations with when we talk with prospective grantees in other countries, because a lot of them are starting to bring back the teaching of more indigenous instruments. And we say, oh, cool, you could use your in-kind grant to buy those strings. They're like, you make those strings? Yes, we do. But when I am outside of my four walls of New York City, I love having completely different experiences. And while New York City may feel extremely foreign for so many people, even who live in this country, to me it feels very average. That's my everyday. I don't own a car. I take the train. I walk to my grocery store. Those things are not typical for most Americans. And in that same respect, when I leave what I am used to every single day, I get to learn what's typical for other people all around the world, and I love that.
Let's talk about the foundation, your philanthropic foundation. And John, I want to start with you. Were the beginnings of that when you were a teenager? Was the company doing things for the community, for the music community and for your local community, and to even today, the most recently, your matching grant that you put together last month for the wildfire funds in California. very specifically for helping the arts, local arts. And
Sure.
how was it born and how has it evolved to where it is today?
Okay, I'll give a little history, and then I'm sure Karen, can fill in the void. But the foundation actually started as a means to support emerging artists in the classical guitar realm.
No kidding.
Believe it or not, yes. And in many cases, my uncle and his wife Janet, that's where they developed relationships with emerging classical guitar players, and they actually literally collaborated with these players in terms of developing new strings and better strings. But it really was a means to connect with these artists and raise the awareness of D'Addario as a brand in that space. But over the years, as I got involved in the day-to-day of the business, it's evolved into more of a charitable organization for programs all over the world, particularly in communities where music education or opportunities to experience an instrument is not readily available. Mm-hmm. So it's evolved from that, just the classical focus to more of a general foundation that supports music programs, hundreds of music programs around the world. And that's where my sister Suzanne got involved in running the foundation, and really elevating the awareness again of the efforts in the reach of it. And now that Karen's on board, it's a whole other level of sophistication and a whole other level of overall initiatives and reach we have in different communities around the world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Karen, jump on in. I mean, what are all the wonderful things that you're doing with the foundation? How can people support the foundation? How can people receive support from your foundation?
So I like to think of our work as today's work as now having like 3 buckets or 3 categories. And as John said, the roots of the D'Addario Foundation started with an emphasis on classical guitar. That was very important to Janet and Jim D'Addario at that time, and obviously still is very important to the company. And then it evolved over time. I'll say I'm actually only the 3rd leader of the foundation since its incorporation as a nonprofit in 1983. Mm-hmm. It was run by Janet D'Addario, then Suzanne D'Addario-Bruder took over. Suzanne was leading the organization for, I think, 15 or 16 years, mm-hmm. and then I stepped in. So it's really... I'm just continuing the great work that was already laid for me when I arrived. Our 3 buckets of work is that we've got just under 200 grantees annually around the world. I would say about 75 to 80% of them are US-based grantees and the rest are global. We're really intentionally trying to increase our outreach to global nonprofits who are located abroad, because as the company has become so much more global in its focus, it's very important that the foundation is reflective of what we care about as a company. So the commonalities of our grantees are that they are all nonprofit organizations. We're not able to support individuals. It's specifically focused on nonprofits, and that they're providing free, immersive music education within communities that would not otherwise have access to that instruction opportunity. So in most cases, those are communities with financial need, but that's not the only type of need that we have. So one example that I love to give is that we have a couple of grantees who teach music in prisons. So while, yes, of course, the students receiving that content have no financial means at this time, on a bigger issue, they have no access to music without a nonprofit coming behind the bars and working with them. And that's just one example, but we have all different types of populations who our grantees are working with. Again, though, that the biggest character trait of the nonprofits is that they're free programming, teaching music at a very high touch level to individuals who would not otherwise have access to that opportunity. So not a one-off 4 weeks learn to play the guitar, but we're going to start to teach you guitar and we're going to stick with you year after year after year. We can be a steady in your life. And it's not just guitar. We're instrument agnostic. We even support nonprofits that teach brass, even though we make nothing for brass players. As long as you're learning music or teaching music, we want you to be a part of the D'Addario Foundation family. That's one bucket. Our second bucket is that we provide college scholarships to young people who have grown up in those grantee programs. So if you started learning harp in one of these nonprofits when you were 10 years old and you stuck with it, and then you became a mentor for the program, and now you're applying to college, our scholarship is for you. So each year we award 10 recipients of a college scholarship, D'Addario Foundation College Scholarship. And those recipients then become what we call D'Addario Foundation ambassadors, because they really understand what it means to receive benefits from the types of nonprofits that we support. And then the third and newest bucket is really exciting. It's a 5-year research project that we've called the Immersive Music Challenge. And we are, over the course of 5 years, evaluating the impacts that immersive music education and music-based mentoring can have on the academic performance and social emotional well-being of young people, specifically young people who are coming from low-income communities and those who attend high-poverty schools. So we're working with 5 different sites. They are all run by grantees who have been in our grantee family for many, many years. And we're looking at, kids in Long Beach versus kids in Pontiac, Michigan. What are the differences? But their programs that they are receiving are all very similar. They're receiving a minimum of 4 hours per week of free music instruction. And they're receiving an instrument so that there's no barrier. In many cases, these nonprofits are providing them with transportation and food, because those are things that they need in order to be able to participate in these.
Yeah. And Terry, if I may, really the thinking behind the foundation and how the family views it and how even our employees view it, it really comes down to a couple key things. First, giving back, the importance of giving back. And I have to say, my uncle and my father, without question, are the two of the most generous people I've ever met in my life, and I hope to emulate that in the future. And that's number one, is the importance of giving back. The second thing is be a leader. Be a leader in providing these opportunities for kids or even adults that would ever have had that opportunity to experience music and maybe never had the wherewithal to do that. But be a leader in the industry in terms of creating those opportunities and creating more musicians in general. Yeah. So those are the two key things in terms of the philosophy of the family and how we view the foundation.
Yeah. It sounds like one of the extra benefits of everything that you're both talking about with the foundation is certainly you're mentoring the next generation of musicians, but it sounds and it feels like that you're mentoring the next generation of leaders as well. You're creating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Potentially even D'Addario Foundation, D'Addario and Company members, employees. Yeah. I mean, we've got kids that are going off to college and studying engineering and studying law and studying economics, and D'Addario and Company has so many types of talent. It's yes, people are musicians, but what we're bringing in professionally from a talent perspective is across the board of running any business. Yeah. It's very exciting. In terms of how people can learn more about us, D'Addario Foundation, D'AddarioFoundation.org. And you can also link to us through D'Addario's main website, but we always post information there. We've got social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, sharing, information, celebrating who our grantees are, who our scholarship recipients are. Once we start to have the data from the evaluation we're working on, we'll be sharing that out publicly as well. But D'AddarioFoundation.org is where you find us. And while D'Addario and Company is certainly an extremely generous contributor to the D'Addario Foundation, we also do rely on outside support. So that is more than welcome. And we're happy to chat with folks who want to learn more about giving opportunities as well.
And we're going to include all of those links in the description of this episode so people can easily find it. Yeah. And so if you want to be a part of this foundation in any way, as a recipient, as somebody who can, or somebody who wants to support financially or other ways, just the wonderful work. I was going to say amazing, but it's wonderful is really what it is. Just go to any of those sites.
Yeah. And also on that site, Terry, if there are nonprofits listening to this, or even other listeners who know of nonprofits who might fit the mold, we actually have an eligibility quiz right on our website, right on the D'Addario Foundation website, where folks can click through a couple of simple questions to understand if they do, in fact, qualify for one of our grants.
That's great. Yep. Thank you for sharing that, Karen and John. You both made reference to classical guitar, classical guitar strings. And one of the things that comes to mind, just as far as the curiosity aspect, the high integrity, the always trying to be better aspect of everything that you do. Your nylon guitar strings are a great example of that, because, you know, I'm looking at the electric nylon hanging on the wall behind my left shoulder, and it's a Rick Turner Renaissance electric nylon guitar. And the guitar strings that you make, the Pro Arte series, even of that series, there's a specific string that you all recommended to me, for your team did, you know, for the electric, that's different than the Pro Arte set that I use on my Ramirez acoustic classical guitar.
Yeah.
The subtlety is just beyond magnificent. You know, it's really, you know, and again, you always say, well, try these two sets, you know, and see, you let us know which one works better for you, you know, and then we'll use that information as well. You know, but it's very interesting. So it's, you know, I don't just have one set of Pro Arte nylons for all of my nylon instruments. You know, they're specific and really complement each instrument in a right. And, you know, or you make nylon strings for viola, but that's a different length and it's a different thing. Yeah.
You know, Terry, one of the keys to being able to do that is a philosophy that our company has always had, which is called vertical integration. And what I mean by that is, an example of that would be, we literally extrude our own nylon. Years ago, we were sourcing nylon, but whether it's monofilament or multifilament, from a variety of sources. And because the music industry is so small, you're unimportant to these suppliers, and they would never really be motivated to work with you to develop new things. So we brought it in-house. And by having it in-house now, we're able to control costs, we're able to control quality. But the most profound thing that a vertical integration capability is involved is the innovation opportunities you have, right? And so that's what puts us in a position to run experiments with different materials and different processes in that extruding work cell. So I like to say that's a competitive advantage we've created, where we literally have created a workbench of innovation, essentially, and that's what makes these things possible.
Right. Sometimes inspiration comes from unexpected places. So I'm wondering, let's start with you, Karen. Where do you find your inspiration, and what inspires you in life?
Oh, well, I do live in New York City, so I feel like I'm at an advantage to just walk around and be inspired all the time, walk out the door. But I would also say some people in my life in general who I find inspiring, certain friends, certain family members, and just speaking with them regularly and spending time with them regularly really helps me ground myself and continue to have ideas.
And John?
Terry, I would say, going back to my uncle and my father, I mentioned that they're very generous, but the thing I also admire about them is, they really came from nothing. They had to build a business from scratch. They had to take a big chance in doing that. They worked incredibly hard over the years. They were able to find a way to be perfect complements to each other in terms of skill sets. Jim was more of the innovation and marketing side. My dad was more of the admin, business strategy side. It's amazing how they were able to work together and develop what exists today. And there's not a day that goes by that I have to reflect on that, and because I would never be sitting in this seat if it wasn't for the work that they did in the early stages of the company. So that to me is very, very inspiring, as is the fact that, listen, we take a lot of pride in the fact that the Dario name is on a product, and because of that, we take it very seriously, in terms of the quality of it. And even with our own employees, it's like, that's your name also. And that's the mindset we want them to take into every production process that we have out there. It's like, think of it as if your name is on that product, because it is to a certain extent.
Well, you also have deep family roots in Italy, with this business.
Oh, yeah.
You were saying the company was actually founded in the 70s? Did you say 73?
Well, the company that exists today was founded in 73, but my family started importing strings when my great-grandfather emigrated here in 1905. And eventually he started making strings himself because of trade embargoes around World War I. Right. But we've been able to trace the string manufacturing lineage in the family, believe it or not. We had a consultant that did some research in Salle, where the hometown where our family's from in Italy, and she actually studied, believe it or not, church documents because they included baptism documents, and on those documents, typically the occupation of the father is on the document. Many times it was listed as Cordero, which is Italian for string maker. So that's how we were literally able to prove that string manufacturer has been in our family as far back as we can trace to the late 1600s.
That's great.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. John, what do you think has changed the most during your career, and what has remained the same?
What's remained the same is the importance of relationships, I would say, whether they're with your customers, your suppliers, or your own employees. They're still vitally important. What has changed, of course, is technology in a big way, in terms of how we engage our customers digitally in many cases, and also how global our business has become. With our products being widely distributed all over the world. So I would say those would be probably the biggest changes I've seen, at least.
And on a personal level, what's changed about your perspective in life as you've gotten older?
To be a little more patient with things. You're going to have your good days and your bad days. In the past, I would take, sometimes I would be really hard on myself on at times to a certain extent, but
that's the
I've learned
in you, right?
That's right, exactly. But I've really have become much more calm and patient, not only with myself, but with other people over the years, and has a lot to do with learning from your mistakes. Yeah.
Karen, what about you? You've been on the planet a few less years than we have, but what's changed about your perspective as you grow older?
I think just how quickly time is moving.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember time moving that quickly when I was a child.
Brace yourself.
I think it's funny because I could probably learn a lot from John's notes about patience. I'm still not great at that. I want things done right now. But I think that I recognize definitely value family and view family a lot differently. And I've always been very close with my family, but now as I get older, as my parents get older, my father is in his late 80s, and my brothers and nieces and nephews as well, and it goes back to time, like recognizing how quickly time goes by and just enjoying the time that we do have right now. That's probably the biggest thing that has changed in my own mindset.
I want to get to my 3 closing questions I ask each of my guests, and then I'll give it to you for closing thoughts. So, John, since the show's called Making It, what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Boy. Personally, being happy and making sure that your family's happy. For example, my daughter Lucy is a talented singer dancer. She's actually just got her second professional gig in a production of Sister Act. And you know what? I admire her so much because she's following her passion. It's a very difficult industry, as you can imagine, but she's learning. She's being patient. She's learning from her mistakes, but how awesome is it that she's doing something that she absolutely adores? And that to me makes me very, very happy. And that's what I want my children all to experience. So that makes me feel personally fulfilled. From a business standpoint, one of the things that I value is again being part of this family business. But now thinking forward about what we need to prepare the next generation to be involved in this business if we really want this to be a sustainable family business. And I'm excited about that because we've got a lot of smart G5, we would call them Generation 5 in America. Yeah, they're coming and they're very intelligent and very passionate. And so I'm getting ready for that, that opportunity, which I'm looking forward to.
So J3 and J4 are on the forefront of propelling G5.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty awesome. Karen, what about you? How do you view making it personally and professionally?
I would give a very similar to John's in terms of personally just happiness. And using my own personal time to make sure that I'm enjoying that, spending it with people who I enjoy spending time with, doing things that I enjoy doing, seeing new things. So that to me is definitely making it. And in terms of professionally, it's not too far off, being in a professional place where I feel happy and supported. And I also know that I'm helping to create something fabulous, helping to sustain something fabulous, and helping to align it in a way or set it up in a way that whoever takes over next, and hopefully that's many years down the road, but whoever takes over next is able to just step right in. To me, actually, the last job that I left, I met the person who stepped into that role, and I remember she complimented me on, thank you so much for leaving this particular thing in this particular way. And I'm so glad that I could leave something in a way where it could just seamlessly continue to grow and evolve. And I hope to do the same here professionally. And but for now, just continue to make it grow and evolve in a way that I am proud of, that John and other leaders at D'Addario are proud of, and really that all of my colleagues are proud of.
Well, I have a feeling that you're going to be welcome to stay as long as you're interested in being in the D'Addario family. You seem very much a part of it in this past year, very quickly. Karen, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
I think 3 tips for success: definitely listening well, going after what you want, but being realistic about it, and really going after it. So not just to want it, but to actually take actions towards that. And also negotiate. I think there's always room for negotiation. And I say that professionally and personally. I think everything is a little bit of give and take, and to push a little bit until you get what it is that makes the most sense for your own success.
John, for you, 3 tips.
For me, it would be first and foremost, set goals. In some cases, set some stretch goals for yourself, right? Something that takes a little bit of a different way of thinking to achieve. The other thing would be, I would say, learn from your mistakes, as we mentioned before. And don't be afraid to take risks. And you know what? Be resigned to the fact that, hey, it may or may not work, but I'm going to learn from it. And then lastly, I would say is, be very disciplined and work hard. I mean, that's what I've learned from my father, my uncle, and I apply it continually today. And as a leader, in terms of leading by example, that goes a long way, and people really respect that and feel like it's a company that's in good hands.
And sounds like that's what you and your wife teach your kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where'd you meet Michelle?
Oh, I met Michelle in college, believe it or not, on
great.
a blind date, believe it or not. Yes.
Wow.
And when we were freshmen at the University of Richmond. Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah.
My final question to you before I turn this over for closing thoughts to you, John, at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
What would I tell my younger self? Boy, I would say continue playing the piano, as we touched on before. That would definitely be one thing. And gosh, I don't know. I mean, I would going back to what I mentioned before, tell myself, listen, don't be too hard on yourself. Sometimes things are not going to go the way you want them to do, but you can't take it personally. You can't be too hard on yourself as a result. And again, I know this has come up over and over again, but learn from your mistakes, and they're going to happen, but don't let them get you down, and just keep fighting forward. Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Karen?
What would I tell my younger self? This is a really hard question, Terry. And I even had time while John was giving his answer to think about it. I would say I tend to think of myself as someone who has a good memory, but there are so many times where people have shared people that I know, that I've known for many, many years, have shared stories. Remember when? And I don't remember, and I have to be reminded. And so I would tell my younger self to pay attention to everything and try to hold on to and keep as much of that as possible, because I love looking back on things. I know looking ahead is incredibly important, but I also love looking back on incredible experiences that I've had and being able to hold on to some of those and apply those to what is ahead. And so I would say to try to absorb as much as possible during the years when I wasn't focused on absorbing.
Mm-hmm. And before we say our goodbyes, is there anything you'd like to add to this conversation, Karen, for our audience to know about
I
you
think
or the company?
Yeah, I would just say I hope we all have an opportunity to connect at some time, whether it's because we all play on D'Addario strings or reeds or sticks, or because you're doing work out there that you think could be relevant to the foundation or contributing in some way to the work that we do. Hope we have an opportunity to meet.
And you're reachable.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, John, closing thoughts from you.
One of the things I often think about is, how we can create more awareness around how you can make a career out of something that you're passionate about. And I can't tell you how many times I come across passionate musicians, even musicians that use our products regularly, that don't realize that they can make a fulfilling career in the same space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a career. And I don't think our industry does a good enough job of promoting that, the awareness around how you could take a passion of playing music and actually apply that passion to something that you absolutely love to be a part of, which is being a part of a company like ours.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, to me, it's really mind-boggling that there's not enough awareness around that, because we come across candidates all the time from big companies that and we hire them, and they're like, I never would have thought that this an opportunity like this would be possible, right?
Yeah.
So it's really an interesting dynamic, and something I'd like to see change.
Well, it sounds like that's in your hands, because it looks like our government is becoming less interested currently in supporting arts, not just supporting but encouraging.
Absolutely.
With things going on with taking over the Kennedy Arts Center and various things like that, that are concerning to somebody like myself, and I would imagine you, who feel so passionately about the arts and supporting the arts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's great that it's important to you, to bring it up. And what would you say to somebody who's young and just formulating their idea, and what advice would you give them to encourage them?
Well, I mean, you really should think about what is your passion, and where you can apply it, and where those opportunities are. And in our case, like we talked before about the foundation, how wonderful would it be for us to hire someone that went through one of the nonprofit programs that we supported and actually start a career here.
Yeah.
And how cool would that be?
Yeah.
And many times those children that are part of those programs, number one, they if not for that program, they probably never would have had a chance to
Mm-hmm.
get into playing an instrument. And number two, even think about that could lead to a career path for me, in a much different way. So I don't know, that's a pretty cool thing, I think, in my mind.
I see that not only as possible, but inevitable.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that, the next generation of partners, in your company and in your foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We just hired an intern for the foundation, actually, who is a graduate of one of our programs. So.
Perfect. So it begins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, John, so much for your time. Thank you again for your continued support to my music and everything that I do. I think that artists know, companies know, but listeners might not know. Endorsements are about one of the key words that you said many times during this interview: relationships.
Yep.
And artist relationships, when they work their best, are as ours has over the many, many years, even before you were running your family company, which is, we support and lift each other because everybody is passionate about what they do, and they're and excelling at the highest level to do it. So I thank you again. I'm honored to be, one of many amazing artists who work with your company.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. To all of our listeners, thank you for joining us this week. And I encourage you all to stay safe and stay inspired. And we'll see you next week. So thanks, everybody.